So I've got a question for you. If in today's day and age this is a BMW and this is a Mercedes, then what's a Cadillac? Is it this, or perhaps even this? It turns out after some research, the correct answer is more along these lines. And yes, we did drive it together, and it was pretty good. However, Cadillac felt they needed something with more seats. So they came up with this, the XT6, which leaves us with a new job today, and that is to get reacquainted with Cadillac. I've always found it fascinating that GM is rather good at sharing engines across its brands. Here's an example, V6 in a large, long, somewhat luxury vehicle. And there's plenty of power. So it works in that it delivers on the mission, but where it lets a Cadillac down is a hell of a lot of noise. The way in which it delivers power is not, I would say, conducive to a Cadillac. There's noise, not pageantry. Notice I use pageantry with these kind of cars usually. As soon as I stepped off the plane in DC to drive this thing, there was a question that needed an immediate answer. What the hell is it? Is it a gussied up Acadia? Does it share any parts with the Traverse or the Enclave? It turns out none of the above. Yes, it shares a floor pan and some mechanical components with the GMC, but from there, it's a completely different structure built on top of the floor pan that gave the designers the ability to make the Cadillac look unlike any other crossover that GM currently manufactures. I had a very interesting discussion with one of the folks at Cadillac, and it turns out they are incredibly targeted with this thing. They're thinking more Acura, Lexus, rather than Mercedes, BMW, and that is reflected in the steering. And what's interesting here is you would expect it to be vague on center feel. Turns out not the case. While it is lighter, especially at lower speeds, there's a good amount of balance as one gets a bit more aggressive on some of these wonderful roads here in Northern Virginia. Great examples. We come over this lovely bridge here, get into this wonderful turn here, and that's where you feel the weight. I would go so far as to saying this is one of the better attributes, these driving attributes of the XT6. Somewhat surprising. Remember back in the day when Cadillac and Buick used to have sporty models that were really nothing more than their basic models with tape stripes and blacked out trim. Fast forward to today, and it turns out that practice has pretty much died off. Here there's a sport model, but there's also a basic model which is called the Luxury. The Luxury, it's a front-wheel drive, although you can get all-wheel drive, passive dampers, and a lighter steering system. The sport model has a laundry list of mechanical changes. Turns out there's a faster steering rack, active dampers, unique throttle mapping on the engine, active yaw control, and then there's that all-wheel drive system. It's not only fitted as standard, it's totally different. More on that later. And then, of course, there are some habits that are hard to die off. There's some black trim here, but also the dashboard on the Sport is carbon fiber. Yes, I am well aware that this is more on the luxury side of the luxury sport spectrum in the fancy crossover world, but you and I still need to try this. Please do not attempt this at home. Dig a bit deeper, and well, the belt worked. We got that. The thing you notice immediately is the pedal feel. It's unusually good both in a panic stop as well as around town. Is it any better or worse than what's out there in terms of actual stopping power? I can't say that it's entirely noticeable. Any crossover that hopes to be taken seriously in places like, Michigan, requires a credible all-wheel drive system. Here, there are two on offer. In that front-wheel drive Luxury, there's a single-clutch all-wheel drive system on offer that can vary the torque front to rear. In the case of the Sport, it can only be had on all-wheel drive, and at that, the system has two clutches, varying the torque front to rear as well as side to side. You can imagine with the additional complexity comes additional programming opportunities. Hate to be Captain Obvious here, but it ain't a Land Cruiser, which means this is not your off-roading vehicle. It can go to trailheads. So found an opportunity here to try out a mode that is specific for these applications. Please do not try this at home, aggressively on a dirt road, in a baby buggy. The thing you notice, it kind of retards the timing of the engine, so you can dig deeper for acceleration, and it says that may not be the best of ideas when you have lower traction environments like this. But overall, everything else is about the same. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game in mine, the options game. And I do believe this is the first time ever we are doing this with a Cadillac, or really any domestic car for that matter. However, one huge technical note, the car we are featuring on this episode is currently on a truck between Northern Virginia and Michigan, so we'll use this as our stand-in. But please do remember as we go through the list here, in reality, today's contestant is the 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury All-Wheel Drive for a base price of $54,695. To that, we add a Platinum package, which gives us nicer leather and much nicer headliner and floor mats for $4,900. Then we add the Enhanced Visibility and Technology package. This is a raft of technology things, kind of like automatic parking assist with braking, rear pedestrian alert, but most importantly, a head-up display for $2,350. Then an option I got to play around with at night while driving the vehicle around the monuments in DC. A party trick, which I still love all these years later, night vision for $2,000. The driver assistance package, again, a raft of technology things like auto seatbelt tightening, adaptive cruise, emergency automatic braking, and more, $1,300. And then the most important option is the color. You see, I got to see practically every color on offer while I was in Northern Virginia. By far the best is Red Horizon Tin Coat. May I suggest it with a lighter color leather interior. Very expensive for paint at $1,225. Then move on to the Cadillac user experience. Yes, Cadillac Q with the embedded navigation and 14 Bose speakers. The stereo system is pretty good, but more importantly, Q actually works. So the processor is now fast after us complaining about it for so long. And the UX, the design of it, the knob and everything, it's actually good. It's now $1,000. Then the seating. So this is a utility vehicle, I get it. You want as many seats as possible for the rugrats. However, it's a luxury vehicle. Don't you want it to look nicer on the inside? So go with less utility with captain's chairs. That actually costs more money, $800. Then the premium headlamp system. There are two headlamps on offer. This is the better of the two. Still waiting for some legal approvals for it to be fully functional. That is also $800. Then we add a comfort and air quality package. I had no idea the tree huggers had taken over the option list on a Cadillac, but this is rear heated seats, front vented seats, and an air ionizer for those residents of Oregon, $750. Then an option that I cannot believe is extra money on a $55,000 car, the security cargo shade, the thing you pull, $75. Come on, throw me a bone here. Then we add a destination charge of $995 for a total vehicle price of $70,390. But wait, there's more. I have a second Panoramic for an XT6 Sport, which has a higher base price because it has more technology we talked about, or really more mechanical bits that have changed. So the base price on that is $57,095. However, the one we're going to drive later in this episode has less options for a total vehicle price there of $65,540. I will let you guess what this Lotus-loving Dave Ramsey disciple would choose out of the two. Let's circle back to how this thing delivers power, because there's something rather unusual here in that you can manually switch on and off the all-wheel drive system. So let's go into front-wheel drive, that is tour mode in GM speak, and then foot to the floor. And the thing you notice is a little bit of lateral pull, almost torque steer. It's controlled torque steer, but you can definitely tell, hey man, this is a front-wheel drive car. But let's slow down, switch into all-wheel drive mode. This is not sport, just all-wheel drive mode. So we're sending some of the torque to the back, and then dig a bit deeper, and it almost magically dissipates that controlled torque steer. Not to the point where all of a sudden say, oh my God, this is a Porsche Cayenne. The XT6's lead interior designer, Gary, great guy, took some time to give me some insight inside the XT6. Turns out there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is the design works really well. Looks like a Cadillac on the inside. Even some of the details, like the unified controller's been updated, it's more intuitive, and some of the satin finish buttons work really well on the dash. Here I would argue I like the XT4 a bit better because there's more hard buttons in the dash of that car. Then there's some good material fit and finish, but that's where the bad news comes in. That only works from the armrests up. From the armrests down, it's really hard plastic, which completely takes away from the experience of being in a Cadillac. The areas that stand out are the bits they spend some money on. Like, for example, the carbon fiber trim on the Sport, that's real carbon fiber. Or the wood on the Luxury, that's real wood. But what was usual to me is there's no satin finish wood on offer. And when you think about the lengths they went to put this really cool design detail into the dash that makes the XT6 stand out from any other car in the segment, why wouldn't you put a better finish to make it look more like a Cadillac? It's funny, Gary, he had a sketch that has this wonderful satin finish book-matched wood in the same design detail, and it looks so much cooler. Maybe it's just me, but when you look at the interior of some of the vehicles this thing is supposed to compete with, the Volvo, the GLE, or even the BMW, it's kind of like the interior fit and finish is the new frontier, not so much how the cars drive. Then there's one last important detail that Gary shared with me. It turns out that panoramic sunroof you see there is fitted as standard onto every XT6. You guys know I'm not a huge fan sitting back of these things, but here we go. That's where I would sit if I was a 6-footer, and not a hell of a lot of room in this position. However, there is a trick. You can move the seat forward and backwards, so there's a little bit more knee room there. And then there's a trick here where you can move this backward and forward, and of course the fancy armrest. This is interesting in that they've got not just cup holders, but a drawer of cup holders. That's a first. I've never seen that before. HVAC controls back here, and then you can plug in your phone. There is not just USB 3.0, there is USB-C as well. Considering what the XT6 is and what it means for Cadillac, really had to reflect upon this, so I parked the car and became a bit of a tourist in DC, and here's what I came up with. Stiff competition. Absolutely the Volvo and the Acura, maybe the Lexus, and Cadillac disagrees with me, but this thing definitely competes with the GLE and the X5, maybe even at the top end with the X7. But not just in the usual areas, also in dimensions. Like, for example, the wheelbase here is a bit shorter than some of the other cars on this list. And then there's the elephant in the room, and that is price. And this is kind of the theme of the XT6. It's not an outlier, it's kind of in the middle of the road in all areas. The area where it does stand out is the basic model. The $52,000 model has the same or virtually same interior as the $70,000 model. The same really can't be said about some of the other cars on this list. All right, while you and I were discussing that, the folks at Cadillac magically switched us into a Sport. And the thing you notice immediately is not so much a stiffer suspension, it's just a better ride quality because there's more damping, even around a turn like this. And this is in Tour mode. Now, yes, I am a broken car guy. This is the one I would choose because it is stiffer. That is not taking into account switching into Sport. Let's do that. And then elevation change around a turn here. There isn't so much control over the lateral movements of the vehicle, especially high up with a crossover type vehicle like this. And while we're on this topic brings up an interesting discussion I had with one of the engineers over at Cadillac. Steve, great guy, such an engineer, he built his own house. And when I say he built his own house, with his own 2 hands. So kind of the guy you want working on a car. Anyway, he's the one that envisioned the tuning of the suspension here, and he was specifically going for more luxury, not really benchmarking an Acura or say a BMW or a Porsche. Now, I'm a broken car guy. I see this as wanting more sporty, even in a family vehicle. I get I'm not the guy buying this. So I'm going to turn this around to you guys and kind of settle the debate between me and Steve here. In a vehicle like this, do you want something that's got composure, which this has, but it's more softly sprung, or do you want something more along the lines of a Cayenne or an X5? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media. MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.